Call this meeting of the Carson City Airport Authority together. Today is Wednesday, May 17th, 2017, 6 p.m. at the Sierra Room of the Carson City Community Center. Madam Secretary, would you call the roll?
Chairperson Law?
Here.
Vice Chair Stotts? Member Barrett?
Here.
Member Harvey?
Here.
Member Torres?
Here.
Member Val?
Here.
Member White?
Here.
A quorum's present.
Approval of the minutes of the past meetings of the Airport Authority.
Move we approve the minutes.
Member Barrett has moved to approve the minutes. Do I have it?
I'll second that. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Member Harvey, second. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Modification of the agenda. The chairman reserves the right to modify the agenda in order to most effectively process the agenda items. Items may be taken out of order. Items may be combined for consideration by the authority. Items may be pulled or removed from the agenda at any time. Public comment. Members of the public who wish to address the Airport Authority may speak on agendized and non-agendized matters related to the airport. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per person or topic. If your item requires extended discussion, please request the chairman to calendar the matter for a future Airport Authority meeting. Are there any public comments at this time? Then we will proceed as shown on the agenda. Item F, number 1, for possible action to approve augmentation of the Carson City Airport Authority 2016-17 budget, authorization for staff to make the required filings. This presentation will be made by Beth Kahn-Cole and Treasurer Harvey. Ms. Cole?
Thank you. I believe based upon the budget that was reviewed last time, we had the tentative information on where you thought you would end up for 2017. That information plus updated information on your grants was used to do this budget augmentation for 2017. A quick summary is you expect a little bit less grant income. You had the donations in 2017, and you had additional rock sales. And you used those funds to net decrease on capital outlay because your grant revenue went down, but you did add the terminal building in the augmentation and some additional services and supplies. And the net budget augmentation is $84,160.
Any discussion on the item? Any further comments? Do I have a motion to approve the augmentation? Public comment on the augmentation? None heard? I would entertain a motion.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the augmentation as presented.
Member Harvey has made the motion.
Second.
Second by Member White. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Motion passes. Item F2 for possible action to approve the Carson City Airport Authority tentative budget as the final budget for fiscal year 2017 to 2018, authorization to certify and transmit the same to the Department of Taxation and the Nevada Tax Commission, authorization for staff to make the required filings. Ms. Cole, would you like to cover this item as well?
The only changes from your tentative budget related to that augmentation, because now we adjusted the grant revenue based on what the engineer indicated you would collect and expend. Other than that, this tentative budget, the final budget looks exactly like your tentative budget that was discussed at the last meeting.
Any questions from the authority for Ms. Cole? Any public comment on this item? Do I have a motion to accept the tentative budget as the final budget for fiscal year 2017-18 and to authorize, certify, and transmit the same to the Department of Taxation and Nevada Tax Commission, and the authorization for staff to make the required filings?
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve item 2 as presented.
Do we have a second?
I would second that motion and offer a friendly amendment. During our budget discussions, we talked about airfield maintenance, line 6319 on the budget, where we put an extra $2,000 into that line item. And we talked about that being for staff to take care of the entryway of the airport, make it look like somebody actually lives there. That discussion included that it's not going to be sprinkler repair, it's going to be weed removal, dead bush removal, and dress the place up so it looks appropriate. And we also discussed that our year-end balance on the net ordinary income, we would have a policy of 8.25% as our minimum balance. So I'd like to offer those two pieces as a friendly amendment.
Member Harvey, do you have comment?
On the one item, we did discuss about the entry-level way, and I agree, and that might be a direction to staff from us, and I don't have a problem with that. I guess the other one, we did have the discussion, but
You're in excess of that 8.3%.
so that's, for you see,
Yeah.
that's not an issue, with it, and I agreed with the discussion. I just want to make sure we're in compliance before
Yes, you're
I
in
would,
excess of that 8.3%.
consider that.
8.25.
Yeah,
1 month of operating expenses is what that amounts to.
Gotcha. Okay.
Member Harvey, will you accept that amendment to your original motion?
I just want to make sure it's very clear so that staff understands exactly what
Right.
we're asking for.
Well, this, the landscaping at the front of the airport has begun, and it is a work in progress. I can't take staff, our maintenance staff, and put him only on landscaping. He has other things to do, like mowing and other functions. However, that is his go-to place when other priorities are addressed. So, yes, he has trimmed the large bushes. He hasn't gotten to the point where he's actually pulling bushes, some of the dead stuff. But he has sprayed the entire front with weed killer, and all it is left really is just clean up and picking up some of the other bushes. He hopes to do some other things to the front to beautify it, but right now we're staying well under that $2,000 addition.
No, we understand. We're not trying to set your schedule, just a specific project that needs to get done and needs to be a priority.
Well, as I stated, we are trying to do this to stay under that $2,000 addition, and I think we'll be well on the way to doing that because it's costing us very little except for Gary's labor.
I guess with that said, I think direction to staff in that area is fine and appropriate, and I'd accept the 8.25% a part of that to add to this motion, if that's okay.
Yep.
Okay. I'll accept.
Any further discussion on the motion? Any public comment? Hearing none. All in favor of the motion? Aye. Any opposed? None heard. Motion passes. Item number 3, for possible action to approve Conan Company LLP to conduct the fiscal year 16-17 audit of the Carson City Airport Authority. Ms. Cohn?
I believe there's an engagement letter that I submitted last year. I'll just give you kind of a history. 2015-16 was not a no, let me see. Yeah, 2015-16 that we do in 2017 was not a single audit because you expended less than $750,000 of federal funds. But 2016-17, which I'll do in 18, is a single audit, and that's why there was an increase in the audit fee to cover that single audit. But other than that, there's been no changes.
Any comment from the authority? Mr. Harvey?
Madam Chair, I've reviewed the agreement and understanding some discussions about the past history, and I just agree with the engagement. We need to do it. It's required, so I'm going to be supportive of the motion to approve this item 3.
And I'll also point out that when I put that in the engagement letter, I don't bill you in excess of that for any of this other work. That's my not-to-exceed fee for the entire year.
Any further questions of the authority members? Any public comment on this item? I would entertain a motion to approve the Con & Company LLP letter for the year 2016 and 17, the engagement letter.
Madam Chair, I would like to move to approve item 3 to engage Con & Company to conduct our 16-17 audit.
Member,
Second?
we have a motion from Member Harvey, a second from Member Barrett. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? None heard. The motion passes.
So I'll just point out for the final budget and the augmentation, Tim, you should submit those by June 1st, before June 1st to Department of Taxation. Thank you.
Ms. Cohn, do you want a copy of these signed documents before you leave tonight?
No, Tim could just get a copy and we'll have it for the record.
Thank you for your help. Item 4, for possible action to approve the request by Brian Culpa of KRNV-TV to operate unmanned aerial vehicles within 5 miles of the Carson City Airport in furtherance of the news agency. Mr. Culpa.
Mr. Culp is not present. I suggest we proceed to see if he shows up a little later on.
We will move past this item to item number 5. And we will leave 4 in abeyance in case he shows up before the end of the meeting. For possible action, approval of the assignment of Cubic's corporate lease, parcel W1C, under lease recorded October 19th, 2006, is document number 360015 to Gonai Aviation LLC. Mr. Lewis and Mr. Hartman, would you care to come forward? And please sign in, spell your name for the record, and proceed. Mr. Clary, would you like to come forward as well? Sorry. Thank you. And if you would all 3 sign in, please. Because there are more than one of you at the table, I would really appreciate it before you start speaking each time if you would announce your name for the record, please.
Well, Madam Chair, members of the authority, my name is Steve Lewis. I am the owner of Sterling Air, which is a Class 1 FBO on the field. I have been operating on the field since 1991 and have been a member of the airport community flying from this airport since 1976. Myself, along with my 2 partners, have formed recently a new LLC, Gonai Aviation LLC, for the sole purpose of purchasing the Cubic's FBO and hangar and the lease that remains there. We, the 3 of us, basically have been the tenants of that hangar, myself, since October 1992. I have leased continuously 50% of that hangar. And then Bill Hartman and George Clary effectively leased the other 50%. And we have come to an arrangement with Cubics Corporation to purchase that facility, and that's what we're here for, is to seek your approval for that assumption of the lease.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from the authority?
So you guys are going to purchase the building and Cubics will no longer have an interest in the property?
That's correct.
Why would there not be a new lease written at that point then? Why is it an assumption of a lease for an entity that no longer has an interest?
I'll have your counsel answer that.
The existing lease has a stated term and has a provision for assignment. And so the lease, it is not set up to terminate when somebody sells the property. So there really isn't a way to terminate the lease at this point. The only thing that you can do is you could withhold consent to transfer it, but that consent cannot be unreasonably withheld, and the authority candidly has never withheld their consent from a transfer of a lease. And so.
But if Cubics no longer has an interest in the property, they've sold it, they no longer have anything to do with it, how do they even still have a lease at that point?
Oh, they don't. Once they assign the lease, Cubics will have no presence on the airport and will have no interest in the property whatsoever. The hangar goes with the lease. The assignment of the lease is what's being presented to you guys. Presumably, there's some monetary transaction that went on between Gonai Aviation and Cubics to accommodate this deal, and that's frankly not relevant information to us. The only thing that's relevant to us is it's an ongoing FBO, and the proposed use is to continue the existing use. And so we don't have the situation where we've got a new business entity coming on and needing new space where we need to evaluate, are they qualified to do the business? Is there enough space? Will it interfere with other space? Will it cause the airport to pay money? And the rest of the considerations under the business application statute or ordinance. So it's basically just a straight assignment of the lease.
Did that answer your question, Member Val? Yes. Okay. Any further questions? Any public comment on this item? Seeing none, do I have a motion to approve?
I move to approve.
Member Val, and Member Barrett seconds. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor of the motion? Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
Item number 6. For possible action regarding the request by Dennis Giangreco, lease parcel 219B of airport land for the construction of hangars for aircraft storage, determine proposed use, and proceed with appraisal and recovery of the cost of the appraisal. Mr. Giangreco? Yes. And if you would sign in, please, spell your name for the record, and begin. Let the record reflect that Mr. Giangreco has submitted for our examination a set of blueprints and a handout showing the construction, the proposed construction on the property.
Good evening, Madam Chair and Airport Authority. Okay. Dennis Giangreco. I'm a hangar owner down in Los Angeles. I've built about 75,000 square feet in Los Angeles. We moved up to Lake Tahoe 10 years ago, and I want to develop some more aircraft hangar properties. Let's see. So this heritage property is available. I've talked to Tim and Steve about slowly phasing and building it out on a phasing process. I want to get the property appraised for your approval, start construction as soon as possible, phases at a time. I don't want to go bankrupt like so many people have trying to build hangars out there, so I want to just phase it in, keep the cost very reasonable, set up a condo association similar to what's already there, maybe even attached to the Heritage Condo Association, and build out the property that's sitting there.
Thank you. Any questions by authority members?
Chairman, could I just give a little bit more background?
Mr. Takis, please.
Just a little bit of historical background, and I've explained this to Mr. Giangreco already, but this is the parcel that was originally leased by Patrick Dang, and then he couldn't get the finances and the project together, and that's when Perry DiLoretto, who's a successful home builder in Reno, stepped into the project, took over the project, and he had proposed a three-phase plan. And it wasn't until I was talking to Mr. Giangreco and I went back to the plans that I realized, okay, yeah, this was originally proposed as a phase plan, and so certainly that should be okay. What happened is DiLoretto, when he took over the project, had commitments to build a whole lot of hangars, and that's about the time the market collapsed in 2007-ish. And as a result, a whole bunch of people backed out. He ended up building only one row of hangars with 4 hangars in it, and even had a difficult time selling the 4th hangar. And that's the heritage hangars that are out there right now. And so when that happened, then he wanted to walk away from the lease, but he'd already put all the infrastructure in, and after a bunch of wrangling, essentially we in the city allowed him to walk away from the lease, recognizing that he had done a bunch of improvements to the property. And then we carved out the heritage hangars, that one row and a taxi lane for their use. And the area to be leased to Mr. Giangreco, or whoever bids on it once it's put out to bid, is the balance of that parcel. On some maps, it's just shown as 219A is the entire parcel. There's a record of survey that shows 219B being the next parcel down. However, if you look at our lease parcel map, the area that we're really talking about is listed as 219B on our lease parcel map. Assuming we go forward, I'll make sure that the description that we put out there for the appraisal and for the resolution to accept offers on it correctly identify the right property. And then just to recap, the process that we do to lease land, which is required of every city, county, and governmental entity in Nevada, is that we need to have a current appraisal. We need to adopt a resolution stating, okay, we're going to put this piece of property, we describe the property out to lease. We have terms and conditions. Here's what we're going to allow to be built on it. In this case, it would be hangars for aircraft storage. And the minimum rate is going to be that appraisal rate. And then it's a sealed bid process. We set a deadline for people to submit sealed bids. We set a date on which the airport authority or the manager opens the bids, and then a date for the authority to consider the bids. We haven't gotten a lot of bidding lately. It could very well be that Mr. Giangreco will be the only person bidding, but we won't know that until we put it out to bid. The appraisal does cost some money. as we did the last time we went out, and the statute provides, we can ask the applicant to advance the funds for the appraisal. I've told Mr. Giangreco that if we go down that path and somebody else ends up outbidding him at the auction, so to speak, that one of the requirements will be that they have to reimburse him for the cost of the appraisal, because it's not fair for him to pay for an appraisal if he doesn't end up getting the parcel. Beyond that, that's the process, and so we're at the first step. The first step is for you to decide, yes or no, do you want to put this out to, you want to march down the path of putting this out to bid? And if so, the first step is to authorize the airport manager to go get the appraisal upon advancement of the funds. And I'm sure the airport manager will work swiftly to do that if he's authorized to do it. The city has a list of approved appraisers for this purpose, and so he'll probably do what we usually do, which is we call each of the appraisers and find out who can do it the quickest and the cheapest. And that's the person we use. As long as they're on that list, they're MAI certified appraisers. We haven't had any issues with any of the appraisers. And so that's, and I apologize for interrupting, but that's kind of the background. And I've explained that all to Mr. Giangreco, and he's very interested in going forward.
Thank you, Mr. Takis. Any other questions? Mr. Barrett?
Yes, thank you for that recap. Sir, could you share with us your plans for the property that you hope to get leased?
Sure. I'm going to phase it in. I'm going to build structures that will accommodate higher-end aircraft, light jets, turboprops. You don't want to build a 40-foot by 30-foot hangar for a 172 when the construction costs are so expensive. You can't sell them. I think with turboprops or light jets, there's a market for that. The freeway's coming in there. The big thing going on at the Gigafactory, I think there's a demand. I've built 75,000 square foot of hangars down in Los Angeles. They've been rented since day one. I can come in at a reasonable rate to sell them, and I want to build it in phases. As I sell them, just keep leasing more land till we have the whole property built and leased out.
Could you share with us, and I know it's looking into the future, so that's always a dicey thing, your time frame for this kind of thing?
I think if I can sell them, if I can get them sold, I'll put it this way. In 2001, I leased 53,000 square feet of land in Los Angeles. I had them, when I got the lease to finish, I did it in under a year. But I leased them. I still have them. I didn't sell them. This thing is a little different. I've got to sell them and just keep building them out and then set up a condo association. So it's a little bit different. The market's a little stronger as far as leasing hangars goes down in Los Angeles than it is here. And the cost is probably 3 times as much now as when I did it in 2001. But I still think there's a market. I'm going to keep it under $100 a foot for sure to sell. And that's what the market is right now. It's going to be under that for sure. So I honestly think I can get it done rather quickly.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions? Member White?
Are you planning to be an on-site landlord, or how is that end of the business going to work?
I'm going to be an on-site. If I say the first phase does not sell, let's just say it happened like with Dorado or whoever it was, then I would just lease them out. I'd be an on-site landlord. I live here, so yes. I would just lease, if I didn't sell the first phase, let's say, I would lease the first phase out and be an on-site manager. And I'm going to see if I can hook up with the Heritage people on their condo association and just extend it and be part of theirs. On those diagrams, I still need to put 30 more feet of taxi lane in. So I'll take 10 of theirs, so we'll be 40, even, and then move forward that way, and then just build it out from there.
Any other questions? Any public comment on this item? Mr. Graber? Please sign in and spell your name, even though it's very simple.
Brad Graber. Is the 219B, is that all of the dirt from the asphalt from Heritage over to the taxiway? Is that the property that's up? That's the whole thing? Okay. And the utilities that are there are total?
Correct. The utilities, and I provided a copy of the utilities map with my briefing and to Mr. Giangreco. The utilities have all been installed. The beauty of this for Mr. Giangreco is that he already has, it's already been mapped out, he's got a plan, and assuming that what he wants to build fits what the utilities are there, he should be good to go. The downstroke is it's going to appraise for a little bit more because all the utilities are installed.
Electricity, water, and sewer?
Yeah, I didn't look really closely at the maps. The airport engineer's looking at them now. Maybe he can answer that, but I think so.
Sewer, Brian Fitzgerald with Atkins. Gas, storm drain, sanitary, sewer, and water. I don't believe electrical was supplied initially, at least what the plans are reflecting at the moment.
There's two different.
Well, there's 4 boxes out there that look like electrical.
Yeah, there's two different maps, and so. I don't know. Did you notice, Mr. Giangreco, when I provided you
The boxes are there.
Yeah.
So
So the conduit's probably there. You might, if you
probably
anything,
still
you
got to
might
pull
have
all the
to.
wire, but
Is there 3-phase?
well,
Unknown.
Okay. And totally unfamiliar with the process. How is this noticed?
Well, this portion just appears on our meeting, and it's part of our agenda notice under the open meeting law. The next step, when they adopt a resolution, we publish a notice in the paper.
It's the paper.
Yeah, and then we also try to widely circulate it, so that people know it's available. But definitely goes in the newspaper. That's one of the requirements.
Thanks, that's all. Good luck.
Thank you, Mr. Graber. Are there any other questions of Mr. Giangreco? Do I have a motion?
Be happy to make a motion to move we approve the staff to proceed with the appraisal for the lease rate for lease parcel 219B, conditioned upon Mr. Giangreco's advance to the appraisal fee.
I have a motion from Mr. Harvey. Do I have a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion on the motion? Any other comments? Mr. Takis?
I was just going to say, Mr. Fitzgerald just confirmed the electrical is in. It's shown on the maps.
Thank you, sir. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay. Hearing none, the motion carries. Yeah. Mr. Rowe, did you get any information from Mr. Culpa that he might not be here?
I did not. He's told me that he would be here at the meeting. However, since he is not here, I suggest that we just postpone it until the next meeting, and I'll ensure that he's here.
Chairman, if the airport manager is satisfied that he's otherwise qualified, this is a relatively road approval. I wouldn't have any problem with you going forward and approving it. The criteria is they have to comply with the FAA Part 107 requirements, and they need to notify the airport manager if they're flying within a mile of the airport. I'm not sure that his presence here would change anything, but obviously if you guys have questions, then you would want to bring him back.
Yeah, just to reiterate what Steve said, I've talked with this gentleman, and he is experienced UAS pilot. There's another pilot that is getting his 107 certification, and this is basically for news gathering information. So I really don't have a problem with what he's done. I've already explained to him my parameters, operating close to the airport, and he is agreeable to those.
Has everybody reviewed the items that were sent to us electronically? Does anybody have any objection to us moving forward with this item this evening?
I do have a question of the man.
Member White?
Tim, my only question for him tonight was to make sure that he really understood the timelines of when he needs to notice the airport that he's going to fly, considering many times these news guys are going to be on an emergency basis. So that was my only, not really concern, but just want to make sure he's fully abreast of that. I see he's got all the training certificates, but if you can have a conversation with him about being on the top of that.
I will do that. In the nature of the news business, you're correct. We don't know when and where exactly. In a perfect world, I like to have 24 hours notice, especially if I have to get a notice to airmen out. But yes, I will talk to him and make sure that he understands that I need to know when and where.
Member Val?
I had the same question, but mine was a little bit further. Do you know if he has a radio or if he's going to be participating in the radio communications with the manned aircraft while he's operating?
He does have a manned radio. He does not operate the drone it's by himself. He has someone with him who has a handheld radio to operate. So he does have that, yes.
Any further questions of the committee? Any public comment?
I do have a comment.
Mr. Barrett.
I'm uncomfortable, despite Attorney Takis's view of it and our airport manager, with taking action until we've heard from this fellow. I used to be in the news business, but I was in a slower version of it. But without getting into trouble, I'll try to say that I don't trust every newsman I've ever met.
I don't think there's any problem in bringing it back. I just was thinking if there weren't questions, we could go ahead. So really, it's your prerogative.
I have no objection. Does any other member have an objection? If so, state. No objections being heard. Is there any public comment on this item? Hearing none, do I have a motion?
I move that we accept item 4 on the agenda as written.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Oh, sorry.
I'll abstain.
Let's back up just a moment. Any public comment on that? I thought I asked for that, but maybe I didn't.
You did.
Okay, all right. Aye.
I will abstain.
Member Barrett has abstained. Anyone in opposition to the motion? None being heard, the motion carries with one abstention. Okay. Get back to where I was. Moving on the agenda, airport engineers report, please, Brian.
All right, Brian Fitzgerald. I seem to sound like a broken record with these updates based upon our lovely winter we've had, but moving forward, we have scheduled some work on the North Apron. It will be Wednesday, Thursday, Friday of next week to put down the coal tar that had been in discussions, along with restriping once that's been done. Tim is aware of the dates. He's been in contact with the tenants, and we will be getting that material down to the best of our ability. The apron will remain open, however restricted, since we're working on the peripherals for the most part. So you will be able to access in and out for the most part. Electrical power pedestal is supposed to be in by the week of the 29th, and it's their intention to install that as soon as possible so that we can finally get our lights powered, and then we'll do our inspection after that. Once that's been done, I believe we're at the end of the project. We can then start closing it out and move on to the next step, which is the airport master plan. And as my brief stated, they don't have, the FAA does not have instructions right now to move forward with any of their funding for projects at the moment. It's just, higher up the food chain than what they're giving me. So I can't give any kind of dates at this moment. They don't know what kind of dates would be available for starting that project. So that is technically still on hold pending the FAA funding. And that's all I had at the moment. Is there any questions?
Any questions of Mr. Fitzgerald? Any? Mr. Bell?
We drove around recently during the rains, and we were looking around, and there's a lot of standing water on certain sections of some of those drainage ditches that doesn't go anywhere. Is that supposed to go into the water table, or is it meant to just sit there and evaporate off?
I'm assuming between the runway and taxiway systems.
Yeah, exactly.
Over the years, sediment has built up in certain areas, and so it has caused those ponds. The initial intent was for it to drain off airfield, but the current ponding is acceptable as long as it's not making bird attractions, and it will eventually dissipate via either evaporation or infiltration.
Are we going to have issues with like mosquitoes or any other pests that might be living in that?
That's to be determined. We'd have to do an examination of the water just to find out how stagnant or fresh it is, and then go forward from there, which we can do if the need arises.
A lot of the water has leached into the ground. I personally don't believe there's going to be any problem with mosquitoes. So the only issue that I perceive is some of the ponding down where the rock area is, because there's still some borrow pits out there that haven't been covered, and that is a very good location for mosquitoes. We're hopeful that we are moving rock, and as they move it, those areas will be filled in. It's a slow process, but hopefully it'll be dealt with sooner rather than later.
There's no budget money or anything like that for mosquito abatement?
No.
Is that right?
Not here.
So if the water stands around for another month or so, we could have issues with pests? Now, yeah. I mean, we're getting them on our planes already. The stuff that we're flying, we're covered in bugs right now, and I'm trying to figure out where they're coming from.
Well, with that in mind, we'll look into it deeper to find out if it is being caused here on the airport, and if so, where.
That standing water is not a threat to any of the taxiways or anything in terms of like erosion?
No, they should
Okay.
not.
Not like Dayton?
No.
Well, I understand the bugs. I flew through a gamut of bugs over the weekend over the Carson River, out past the prison, and it's bad out there. And that's going to be a prime area for mosquitoes. This is going to be a bad year for bugs.
Also, we did, when we did the through the fence calculations, there was a portion of the salaries and so forth for Gary that was bug abatement, if I remember correctly, because we rolled that in there.
Yeah, but most of that goes to ants. We have a big problem with ants, but yeah, we do deal with some of those pests. I've been reluctant over the past couple of years to hire pest control because they want a year's contract, and I don't like signing year's contract for somebody to show up once a month and spray. So as far as ponding, well, we've had in the past when we had the clay duck ponds.
He loves those, by the way.
Yeah, this was a miscalculation by our engineer, and Gary was out there with the pumps and the gasoline-powered pumps. And if this is a problem, we'll do the same thing again. So we still do have those pumps.
Member White?
So for any of these kind of bugs or pests, in regards to hiring a contract for a bug killer person to come out, I would check with the UNR Cooperative Extension, see if you can get some assistance from those folks. That's kind of what their job is take care of these large pieces of property and mosquito abatement.
I'll look into that.
You might also check with the health department. They do some of that as well. Any further questions? Thank you, Mr. Fitzgerald. Moving on, airport manager's report.
On May 3rd, Chairperson Law and I had a meeting with some city officials to discuss the FAA Part 13 complaint letter received by the airport and the city manager's office. Present was Nick Morano, city manager, Dave Rubin, and Sean Slemon, the new fire chief, Lee Plemmel of the building department, and Karen Machado, tax assessor's office. The city manager opened the meeting and expressed his desire to see that the airport fall into compliance with Title 19. Now, we bandied about a lot of comments by all entities, and what we came up with was something that we probably ought to see about putting on the agenda to form a working group to work with the city to come up with a solution. And I'll leave that up to the chairman, or chairperson, to do that. But right now, we have a good relationship with this group, and I think that we can find common ground and come up with some kind of, like I said, solution. Now, I put out a bit of a memo to the chairperson and legal regarding the wildlife hazard assessment performed by a block grant from the FAA to the state of Nevada. Several airports were involved in that assessment, including Carson City, Minden, Elko, and I believe Winnemucca, among others. I received a request by the FAA to submit a wildlife hazard management plan due to the findings of the wildlife assessment performed by the biologist. And I'll just, for sake of shortening the term, it's called a WHMP, would have been very costly. I asked Brian to do a little search on how much something like this would cost, and he came up with a number of $20,000 to $25,000. And the wildlife hazard management plan would have also included hiring an additional staff member just to conduct inspections and do that. What I found was that this plan was largely designed for Part 139 airports. So I set up a meeting, teleconference with the FAA, the biologist, and Brian. Joe Carlini and Holly Dixon were involved, and Jean Marie Reek, who also was the biologist who actually conducted the assessment. Through our discussion, they told me that this couldn't be enforced. Well, that's fine, but it's in writing. So what I needed was something adjusted that I can bring to the authority. And it was through a consensus that they decided that they're going to rewrite this. Instead of a required plan, they're going to come up with a standard operating procedure, and wherever the term required was mentioned, they're going to change that to recommended. So at some point, we'll get that. We're expecting it sometime later. I say later in the year because these things move very, very slowly. So the FAA was okay with this idea, and I also suggested that they share the information with the other GA airports that where the studies were conducted. So whenever I get it, you'll get it. We'll be hopefully on the same page, and everything will be a lot easier. Are there any questions on that issue?
When was this assessment done?
The assessment was conducted over about a year's period and finished late last year. I think November was roughly when Jean Marie finished her studies. If you ever ran around the airport, she was the one with the little traps, and she was the one that found deer coming into the airport, which we knew we had a few, but she mentioned that there were more than just a few. So we need this assessment and the recommendations, especially in order to get funding for fencing. In our discussions with Joe Carlini and Holly Dixon, I told them that we will be discussing an 8-foot fence during our ACIP meeting next year, or in the fall. And we'll definitely need some help with that. Usually, you can correct me if I'm incorrect, Brian, but in our master plan, the fence is 6 foot with a barbed wire top. Well, deer can still jump that. So we're looking at an 8 foot with a barbed wire top that'll make them think twice about trying. So if the FAA is willing to fund that, that would help mitigate a lot of these kind of problems.
Are there any other questions? Any public comment on this item? Hearing none, thank you.
One little item also is our
Turn on your microphone, please.
I was approached a couple of weeks ago by Cactus Air Force. They want to do an open house. So they are going to be sponsoring most of it, and we're in a hurry and a mad dash to put on a little bit of an open house. The one issue that I'm still dealing with are volunteers, and I'm looking for some, and I might have the Civil Air Patrol cadets to help with parking. But every little bit helps, and it's scheduled for June 10th between 8 and 4 p.m. And that's all I have.
Have you contacted the 99s on that?
I have not, but well, yes, Sandy knows. Sandy's going to help out.
Okay, thank you. Any comments on that item? Any questions? Thank you, Tim. Moving on to the next item, the legal counsel's report. Mr. Takis.
Yeah, there are two bills at the legislature of interest to the Airport Authority and to aviation generally. The chairman was kind enough to alert me that one of the bills, the bill that fixes the fuel tax revenues, has already been passed. Presumably it's on its way to the governor's office for signature. I don't expect there'll be any issues with that. It simply corrects that fuel tax from avgas sales comes back to the airport as opposed to going to the Civil Air Patrol and other organizations. The federal law requires that it come back to airports, and the FAA's been on a national campaign to get that corrected everywhere. Getting it corrected here is a good thing because it ensures that that would not be a reason for the FAA not to give airport grants to Nevada's airports. The other bill was heard on Saturday. I don't have a bill number, but it's basically it was the governor put in $100,000 per year over the biennium, so $200,000 for the biennium to fund the Aviation Trust Fund. Those funds get split up among the airports and are used as matching grants for airport AIP programs. And so unfortunately, I was a couple thousand miles away on Saturday, so I didn't go to the hearing, but I haven't heard any negative feedback, and my inclination is the governor puts it in the budget. Unless somebody really has a burning desire to fight about it, it'll probably stay in. And given that it's $100,000 per biennium in the state's budget, that is a tiny blip on the radar, rounding error for most of the budget items. So I don't think that was going to raise anybody's ire. So those are the two items I have to report on. I don't have anything else to report on, but if you have any questions, I'm always free to answer questions.
Member White.
SB 363, that's the air carrier grants. You know where that's at? I know it went to the Finance Committee on April 17.
I don't know. You know, that bill is really funding for ELCO.
Right.
Plain and simple. And it's worded so that it could be used for rural airports, but when you actually try and fit the criteria, it really only fits ELCO. Big uphill battle for that because it's $1 million. I have not heard what its latest status is, but I think most people in the industry are thinking that bill's not going to go anywhere.
So it's $2 million this year and $2 million next year.
It was amended to even be more. Okay. It's oh, okay. Well, it's even less likely but who knows? You don't know until, as they say, the fat lady sings, and that doesn't happen until, I think, June 4th, 5th. And so anything can happen, and particularly in those final days, crazy things do happen.
Mr. Vols?
You said that bill that fixes the avgas thing, does that mean that we currently are not getting all that money, or is it a fix for a problem that we don't have?
Yeah, no, it's true, we are not getting some money, but it isn't very much money. It's the fuel tax on the avgas, and that fuel tax goes to the state, gets carved up among counties. A tiny sliver is supposed to be coming back to Carson City. That sliver will come back to Carson City now, and then it'll come back to the airport. But when we first looked at it, our folks at NDOT and the aviation department were thinking there were really big numbers, and we drilled into it. It's $100,000 for the entire state. And so when you split that up among airports, we're talking small dollars, which is also kind of good because it got cut out of the Civil Air Patrol's budget, and that's a relatively small amount to them as well. The Civil Air Patrol is primarily funded by the United States Air Force. And so we didn't hear a whole lot of screaming or anything when they were making the change, but it's a really important change to make because the FAA is looking at this issue nationwide. California is a much bigger issue because they were diverting big millions of dollars to other projects, and they've been trying to convince the FAA, well, they're going to other projects, but it's still kind of aviation. And everything I've heard in terms of feedback from the FAA is that argument's not flying. And so it's jeopardizing a lot of funding for California. We don't want it to jeopardize Nevada.
Steve, you had to say not flying.
No pun intended. That just slipped out.
Any other questions of Mr. Takis? Thank you. Next on the agenda is the treasurer's report. Mr. Harvey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You've all received your reports. We're trending well on the income, no real change from the last month. Really noticed our utilities were down quite a bit, and looks like we'll finish pretty low this year. Pretty surprised with winter, but that's good news. You notice we are up in a little up in offsets and legal, but also down in airfield maintenance. So overall, our picture looks pretty good right now. Currently showing a net income where we have budgeted loss, so pretty good at the moment on finances. Like I say, no real change from last month, no big change.
Any questions of Mr. Harvey? Any questions of the public? Not hearing any. Thank you, Mr. Harvey. Do we have any reports from Airport Authority members? Hearing none, do we have any final public comment? Hearing none, I believe we're adjourned. Do we need a motion? I don't think so, do we? Nope. We are adjourned.
Bang the hammer, would you?
I did it.